welcome to the UU Fellowship of San Dieguito. We're so excited to have you here this morning. Lots to celebrate. To begin our service this morning, that's Katie Cleric, our accompanist who played our prelude, and we invite you to rise in body or in spirit for our opening hymn, our processional hymn, Rank by Rank. The words are in our orders of service.
Beautiful, as always. I greet you in the language of my parents and in-laws. Ohayo gozaimasu. Namaste. Buenos dias. Boker tov. Good morning. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of San Dieguito. My name is Leora Cayenne Gutierrez, and I am serving as your president of the board of directors. Whether some of us are bringing our best selves to this space, or some of us might be seeking our better selves, all of us are welcome here, and all of us are loved. We gather today in celebration of our long-awaited installation of our settled minister, Reverend Joanne Elizabeth Green, we affectionately call Rev Jo. Yeah. We welcome you to join us with open hearts and minds. We affirm that this day and our being together can make each of us braver, more compassionate, and wiser than when we woke up this morning. Thank you all for being here in person and on Zoom. And in honor of this special occasion, we, all of us, have presented Rev Jo with a custom stole to warmly welcome her into our fellowship family. You all have great taste. Yeah. If there are any children here in the amphitheater, we want you to know that we do have a RE teacher, Miss Danielle, at the playground to supervise children if they want to be there. Thank you all very much.
We take a moment now in our service to acknowledge that this fellowship resides on unceded land of the Cupeño, the Kumeyaay, and the Luiseno, and that for more than 10,000 years this land has been and continues to be home to these people. We recognize the violent history of colonization in California, and we honor the continuing presence of the Cupeño, the Kumeyaay, and the Luiseno. We light this candle this one here? Okay. We light this candle in recognition of this history and in acknowledgement of our responsibility to these peoples and to this land. Nope.
No, it works. I did it before.
It's not. Yay! Maybe you should.
What a touch.
There we go. It's lit. Thank you. And now it is with anticipation that I say that it is a tradition in Unitarian Universalism to light a chalice to mark the beginning of our services. It is a moment of transition. Beforehand, we are individuals, gathered together almost by chance in one space. Afterwards, we are a congregation, gathered together with intention. May the lighting of this chalice mark a transition in the life of this fellowship, a transition into a new period of hope and love and renewed dedication.
Good job, girl. Come on.
It's tough, I tell you.
I don't know if this is going to work.
Yay. Thank you.
Good morning. Today's call to worship has been adapted from words by Christina Shu. It's called Welcoming the Ancestors. On this beautiful installation day of Reverend Joe Green, I think about how each and every one of us has gotten to this place, to this day of celebration and dedication. As the days grow shorter and the nights grow longer, I think about my ancestors more frequently. I am setting up my Dia de los Muertos altar at home, and I see that all of us have brought with us today our beloved known and unknown ancestors. Thus, I will begin this call to worship by paying tribute and expressing gratitude to our ancestors. From our histories, our ancestors call to us, whispering stories of where we came from and asking questions about where we are going. We are grateful for their gifts, for their lessons, and their challenge, calling us into accountability and responsibility to fulfill their hopes and aspirations for what they dreamed that we would do. We call on and invoke our parents, grandparents, aunties, and uncles, our siblings from across time and place to be here with us today. We call on the early Unitarian Universalists, lay people, and ordained ministers who brought our faith tradition to California and the Pacific Southwest. We call on our ancestors of UUFSD People who literally carved the basin in which we sit today. They who built, grew, sang, and dreamed this church and this community into being. We call on those who represent peoples of the Kumeyaay Nation, those who strove to build communities across the wide plains and mountains of San Diego and Baja Mexico. They who were here before the colonizers. They who were pushed to the rocks and reservations. We call upon our activist ancestors, those who struggled for justice, freedom, and liberation of all people, who challenge us to honor the fullness of each and every human being. We especially lift up those who battled racism and oppression right here in San Diego, which is still alive today, and they ask us to join the ongoing struggle to make this city whole and make certain that each life is treated with inherent worth and dignity. We call upon the honor and beauty of the earth, this particular part of creation that this church ministers in, from the San Elijo Lagoon here in Solana Beach, the Los Panasquitos Canyon Preserve, to the mountains of Soledad and Cowles, and the beautiful view from Ratacate Peak, also known as the Cumachi Mountain. Our interconnectedness to nature and to the history of the land itself calls through the generations to us today. And now I ask you to call to your own mind particular ancestors, family roots, spiritual mentors and guides. Each one of us brings into the room our whole network of people and places. We have welcomed this great cloud of witnesses to join us in the installation of Reverend Joe Green. Can you feel them? Thank you. May our ancestors guide us on our way. May they bless this time and space and the work that we are about to do. May they bless the work that Joe has been called to do. Please, everyone, join me in saying, "Ancestors be with us. Ancestors be with us." Thank you.
I bring you greetings from the Unitarian Universalist Association, which is an embodiment of the covenant that our religious ancestors made to be with one another, to support one another, to move together through the world as one religion and one interconnected people. Specifically, I bring greetings on behalf of the 180 plus congregations in the Pacific Western region of the UUA, which stretches from El Paso, Texas to Honolulu, Hawaii, from Anchorage, Alaska to Billings, Montana. We are vast together. And as your primary contact with the UUA regional staff, I am one of the embodiments of that covenant. That's part of why I'm able to be here at the last minute as your substitute preacher when the wonderful Reverend Adam Dyer couldn't make it, because I'm an embodiment of that covenant. I'm an embodiment of that interdependence of all of the relationships that our congregations have. So all of your religious ancestors, your religious partners, your covenanted congregations across the country are here with you, partnering with you through the joys and the sorrows, the transitions, the triumphs. And it brings me great joy to be with you today for the installation of the Reverend Joe Green. Know that I and your whole faith community will partner with you as you live into your shared vision in this new ministry and beyond. And very best wishes to you on this special day.
Go placidly amid the noise and haste, and remember what peace there may be in silence. As far as possible without surrender, terms with all persons. Speak your truth quietly and clearly, and listen to others, even the dull and ignorant. They too have their story. Avoid loud and aggressive persons. They are vexations to the spirit. If you compare yourself with others, you may become vain and bitter, for there will always be greater and lesser persons than yourself. Enjoy your achievements as well as your plans. Keep interested in your own career, however humble. It is a real possession in the changing fortunes of time. Exercise caution in your business affairs, for the world is full of trickery. But let this not blind you to what virtue there is. Many persons strive for high ideals, and everywhere life is full of heroism. Be yourself. Especially, do not feign affection. Neither be cynical about love, for it is the face of all aridity and disenchantment. It is as perennial as the grass. Take kindly the counsel of the years, gracefully surrendering the things of youth. Nurture strength and spirit to shield you in sudden misfortune. But do not distress yourself with dark imaginings. Many fears are born of fatigue and loneliness. Beyond a wholesome discipline, be gentle with yourself. You are a child of the universe, no less than the trees and the stars, and you have a right to be here. And whether or not it is clear to you, no doubt the universe is unfolding as it should. Therefore, be at peace with God, whatever you conceive them to be, and whatever your labors and aspirations, in the noisy confusion of life, keep peace with your soul. With all its sham, drudgery, and broken dreams, it is still a beautiful world. Be cheerful and strive to be happy. Thank you. Okay.
Please join me now in the spirit of prayer and meditation. Spirit of life, Spirit of love, we are gathered here as a congregation, some of us physically present, some of us present in spirit, but separated physically by distance or by time. We are gathered here as a congregation to call you, O Spirit of life, and to create you, O Spirit of love, to bless this fellowship and to bless this minister as they officially begin their travels together, their work together, to promote love, to promote spiritual growth, to promote service and right relations and sustainable living. We will work to support one another, and we will work to strengthen the ministries of this fellowship. And Spirit of life, we ask for your help. For the work will be hard. The burden will sometimes be heavy, and we know that the road is long. Spirit of love, let us feel your presence as we begin. Let us feel the joy of a new beginning, the hope of a new day, and the love of our fellow travelers. For this love will support us when joy and hope are elusive. Even on this very day of joy and hope for this fellowship, many of us are carrying some sorrows. Sorrow for friends who are no longer with us. Sorrow for relationships that are not once as they once were. Sorrow for many months of this pandemic. Sorrow for tragedies, personal and global. As we prepare for a moment of silence, may we all feel the sustaining love that surrounds us and that will carry us through the coming years. Let us pause. Blessed be, and amen.
As the choir makes their way up to lead us in our hymn, we invite you all to rise in body and or in spirit for our congregational hymn, De Colores. The words are in our orders of service.
Patricia Coffrey-Stone, our worship associate, is ill this morning. We are sending you lots of love and healing thoughts, and I will be doing the offertory in her place. Today's offertory is for the Living Tradition Fund, which is a very special fund that provides basically 3 types of support for ministers. First, it's a need-based scholarships for theological students who have completed a full year of theological education. Second, it's a new minister assistance to reduce the burden of high educational debt and repayment, student loans. And the third is to provide emergency assistant grants to seminarians, ministers, religious professionals, and other congregational staff, retired ministers, and their loved ones. We do this very rarely. We do this at installations and the service of the living tradition at General Assembly. So please give generously. Thank you so much.
excerpt from Martin Luther King's acceptance speech on the occasion of the award of the Nobel Peace Prize in Oslo, December 1964. Sooner or later, all the people of the world will have to discover a way to live together in peace. After contemplation, I conclude that this award, which I receive on behalf of that movement, is a profound recognition that nonviolence is the answer to the crucial political and moral question of our time: the need for humans to overcome oppression and violence without resorting to violence and oppression. Civilization and violence are antithetical concepts. Negroes of the United States, following the people of India, have demonstrated that nonviolence is not sterile passivity, but a powerful moral force which makes for social transformation. Sooner or later, all the people of the world will have to discover a way to live together in peace and thereby transform this pending cosmic elegy into a creative psalm of brotherhood. If this is to be achieved, humans must evolve for all human conflict, a method which rejects revenge, aggression, and retaliation. The foundation of such a method is love. I refuse to accept despair as the final response to the ambiguities of history. I refuse to accept the idea that isness of humans' present nature makes them morally incapable of reaching up for the eternal oughtness that forever confronts them. I refuse to accept the idea that human is mere flotsam and jetsam in the river of life, unable to influence the unfolding events which surround him. I refuse to accept that view that mankind is so tragically bound to the starless midnight of racism and war that the bright daybreak of peace and brotherhood can never become reality. I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word in reality. This is why right temporarily defeated is stronger than evil triumphant. I believe that even amid today's mortar bursts and whining bullets, there is still hope for a brighter tomorrow. I believe that wounded justice, lying prostrate on the blood-flowing streets of our nations, can be lifting from this dust of shame to reign supreme among the children of humans. I have the audacity to believe that peoples everywhere can have 3 meals a day for their bodies, education and culture for their minds, and dignity, equality, and freedom for their spirits. I believe that what self-centered men have torn down, men other-centered can build up. And the lion and the lamb shall lie down together, and every man shall sit under of his own vine and fig tree, and none shall be afraid. This faith can give us courage to face the uncertainties of the future. It will give our tired feet new strength as we continue our forward stride toward the city of freedom. When our days become dreary, with low hovering clouds, and our nights become darker than 1,000 midnights, we will know that we are living in the creative turmoil of a genuine civilization struggling to be born. Every time I take a flight, I am always mindful of the many people who make a successful journey possible, the known pilots and the unknown ground crew. So you honor the dedicated pilots of our struggle who have sat at the controls of freedom movement as the freedom movement soared into orbit. You honor the ground crew without whose labor and sacrifices the jet flights to freedom would never have left the earth. Most of these people will never make the headlines, and their names will not appear in Who's Who. Yet when years are rolled past, and when the blazing light of truth is focused on this marvelous age in which we live, men and women will know, and children will be taught that we have a finer land, a better people, a more noble civilization, because these humble children of God were willing to suffer for righteousness' sake.
When I said that I'm your local UUA staffer, I meant really local. I live just a couple of freeway exits south of here, between one estuary and the next. And just south of me is McGonigal Canyon. You might know it by its more familiar name, the canyon where the 56 goes. I love walking and biking along the trails in McGonigal Canyon. It's a coastal hills wilderness, much like where your congregation is situated, with California live oaks, sprawling sycamores, towering Torrey pines, and blooming sagebrush. It is gorgeous in different ways all year round, and I'm sure you know that well. You see swallowtail butterflies laying eggs in the wild fennel. You hear the wren-tit birds call out from under the toyon bushes with their characteristic peep, 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 peep call. And when I go into this canyon, this little strip of wilderness in the city, I feel alive and peaceful and held. At some of my most grief-stricken times in this pandemic, I have felt the presence of God there in the breeze, in the spirit of life surrounding me. When I'm in that canyon, my senses come alive, my body relaxes in a way that I just can't do indoors. There, amongst the plant and the animal community of the chaparral, I feel consoled and brought home to myself. Perhaps you feel that right here, worshiping again in the sage scrub of the coastal hills. Such a holy place this is. Perhaps you too have found consolation in the wild places during this pandemic. We need wild places, but such wild places are becoming more and more rare. In sprawling western cities like ours, wilderness is getting bulldozed and boxed in, strained and squeezed. My wild canyon itself has a highway already running through one side of it. For years, I would go on my walks in McGonigal Canyon and feel the joy, but also feel despair. Despair about how the coastal hills used to be and how all of it used to be unspoiled with harmonious and resilient ecosystems, with native peoples who cultivated and lived in harmony with the land. And I would silently give thanks for whoever the humans were who fought to preserve this tiny little slice, just this tiny little slice of what used to be this wild place. I would give thanks for the people who fought to preserve this canyon, the live oak, and let the animals have a place to stay and to be. But one day my thinking changed quite a bit. My dog stuck her nose in the bushes, and I noticed something about a particular live oak tree that I had never noticed. There was a pole there, and another pole on the other side, 2 poles, one on either side of the trunk. Then I looked at another oak, and I saw the same thing, poles, the kind that hold up a young tree when it is planted. I looked beside the sprawling sycamore, and yes, there were poles there too. It suddenly dawned on me, this canyon was not wilderness preserved. This canyon was wilderness reclaimed. It turns out this wild canyon had been agricultural and ranch land before the area got built up. Its natural state had been quite disrupted long before the condos and the malls and the developments showed up. It turns out that this wild canyon that I enjoy today is an ecosystem intentionally cultivated by people with the wisdom of millions of years of evolution in mind. This makes me think about our lives and our congregations. What is our task? Is our task to prevent change? Is our task to preserve at all costs? Maybe our task is instead to not ever keep bad things from happening, but to reclaim, to continually plant and reclaim with the wisdom of millions of years of evolution in mind. How do we tend and retend this ecosystem of our congregation so that it can thrive through all kinds of disruptions and upsets? So it can be reborn and renewed to bring forth the fellowship's healing and life-giving potential. In this time when our lives and our congregation have been so disrupted and put out of balance, we too have a chance to reorient ourselves to that ancient wisdom that tells us how to be in relationship to one another and in relationship with the holy. We can rebuild and reclaim a wilderness ecosystem and a healthy and vibrant way of being. The wilderness of this congregation of UUFSD was disrupted several times over the past 5 years, just since I began partnering with you. You had the unexpected departure of a still new minister in 2019, and were disrupted again with interim ministry, and then disrupted again with COVID in 2020. Never even really got to say goodbye in person to the interim minister or hello in person to Joe until recently. In the midst of that, you have worked on forming a new relationship with a brand new minister. And that's pretty incredible given the circumstances that we've been through. And it has been strange, right? It's been kind of strange to get this new relationship started, on all sides under the circumstances of COVID. And I've heard that it's felt bumpy in some ways. That's to say the least. I get the sense that all of this upheaval has had an impact on us individually and as a congregation, that we're not really quite sure who we are now in the time coming out of COVID separation. We're not really sure how we're going to be together, how we're going to apply our new lessons, how we're going to deal with our new cast of characters, how we are going to manage our ecosystem, so to speak. So I ask us now, as we emerge further from all these limitations of the COVID pandemic, and as you move forward into this new ministry, how can UUFSD be like that canyon that I described, a disrupted place that is growing into a wildly healthy place with an ecosystem that sustains itself? It takes some intention, like the intention and organization of those people who planted those little native oak and pine seedlings and spread those grass seeds, 20, 30 years ago in McGonigal Canyon. What kind of an ecosystem do you want to collectively nurture? The more I learn about growing things, the more I learn about soil, right? Soil. The quality of the soil can make or break our best laid landscaping plans. I've seen that happen in my little condo backyard many times. A wild canyon ecosystem cannot thrive without a healthy mix of soil. It's the thing that makes everything and everyone else be able to grow there. For a congregation, I would say the soil is like your culture, your congregational culture. What kind of a culture here will enable the live oaks of spiritual transformation to flourish? What kind of a congregational culture enables all ages faith development to take root and to spring up in unexpected and beautiful places like California poppies? What kind of a congregational culture supports many cultures within and around it, like the mix of grasses in the meadow whose nutrients support the other species thriving? A good culture for a congregation, though, it doesn't just have one recipe. The elements of the soil vary from place to place, even within one canyon. We can be a multicultural congregation, a community of communities, as Paula Cole-Jones describes us. But the thing that makes the congregation work, with all of its different mixes of cultural soil, is that the soil is life-giving. So collectively, I ask, how do we nurture the culture of UUFSD to bring life to our mission and actualize our transformative power in the lives of all who participate? Well, we can learn a thing or two from composting. A spiritual composting in some way. When we engage in spiritual composting, we are turning the garbage of the past and the former blooms and blossoms into life-giving lessons for the future. So I'll give you some tips, some things I've learned about compost over the years. First, diverse ingredients help. If you've ever tried to make compost without diversity, it doesn't work. You get piles of green grass that turn to mush, piles of fruit rot, piles of leaves just decay. Diversity is an asset when you're building compost, as it is when you're building true community. And this is not just diversity of identity, it's diversity of experience, diversity of perspective and opinion. As a congregation is working through the hurts of the past or the pain of the present or the disruption all around us, the process of lifting up different voices and hearing everyone's stories with respect and acceptance helps us. As we listen deeply to one another, as we speak, as we feel heard, our energy begins to transform. We learn from one another. The way that we connect with one another changes and wisdom begins to emerge. What did we learn as a congregation from that hard experience? What values have we learned that we cherish? What new promises do we want to make? Second, though diversity is good for compost, not everything belongs there. Some stuff will actively get in the way of the processing that needs to happen, right? Meats and fats, animal excrement, plastic forks, banana stickers. Each of those things has its place in the world, but not in the compost. Likewise, a congregational culture has some boundaries on what kind of behavior is acceptable and not acceptable. It's really hard to do the tender and vulnerable work of deep listening and healing when people are behaving in destructive ways. Maintaining a covenant of right relations, a destructive behavior policy, helps the congregation stay attentive to the safety of the space, creating a healthier chemistry among the people, and deepening trust. Now, related to boundary setting is a third thing we can learn from composting, and that's to hold people. To hold the community, not too tightly, but not too loosely either. A compost bin does not work if it is packed too tight or if it is spread too thin, right? To do the transformative healing work, a congregation needs to give people enough space to be their authentic selves, but also to be close enough to express a collective, interdependent identity. Close enough for there to be a we, and far enough apart that there is still an I. We each have our own stories, and we together have a story. And we need to have room for others to join us and to help us write that story. The way we hold each other in mutual support close enough, but always making space for new folks, is foundational to a thriving congregational ecosystem. And finally, there is the work of turning the compost. The compost must be turned regularly and stirred with a pitchfork or a shovel in order for it to do the work of transformation. And sometimes this is hard. Sometimes this is hard. For us, this means turning over the memories, the events, the experiences in our heads, processing the stuff that happened, talking, listening with others, and telling our story until we understand our experience in a newly empowering way. Noticing and claiming our own parts in the messes, and thinking about how we might do things differently in the future. Your interim ministry and your ministerial search discussions, they help turn the collective compost of UUFSD, helping you gain healing and wisdom and empowerment for the future. But they're not complete. The work is not all done. The compost needs to continue to turn. And you will get to turn that compost some more with Reverend Joe. You together create the culture of UUFSD, whether this is your first time here or you are a founder of the congregation. Our job as participants in the congregation is to create that culture together, to create that soil. We together can manage this chaparral ecosystem for maximum health and for diversity. We don't have to be any kind of leader to do it. All the small interactions that we engage in here at the fellowship, the way we say hello, the response we write on that email, the way we catch ourselves before the hurtful words come out of our mouths, the way we apologize and make amends when they do, the way we speak up in love when we disagree, the ways we show respect to one another, the ways we find the courage to be vulnerable, to let ourselves be transformed. All of these interactions, small and large, they add up. They add up to our culture here. This is how we together are the soil that helps the ecosystem thrive. What makes your mission, your brave connections, your deepened spirituality, your embodied justice, and your steadfast love, what makes those things shine out in our hearts and the world, that is up to you. And there is some good news. It's not always so much work, and you are also not alone. Once ecosystems get going with a great mix of soil and plants and life in them, they need less and less active tending to stay healthy. You've had so much transition lately, there's been a lot of tending, right? This ecosystem is always open, always changing, always adapting, yet it finds a sort of a balance. A health and vibrancy that creates health and vibrancy. A life that nurtures life. It becomes just who we are as the fellowship, how we live. That canyon that I love to walk in, that wilderness reclaimed, it is not unique, it's not alone, and you are not either. The health of that canyon is fed by a network of other wildernesses up and down the coast, just like the San Dieguito River Valley just below us. It's also fed by a network of wildernesses inland to the desert, east across the Rockies, even north and south to the tundra and the tropics where the bird species that come and visit us are from. Birds and butterflies travel through all these wild spaces. Bobcats and coyotes spread seed in their scat. Even people exchange information about how to best care for these wild places. Just like this canyon is connected to a whole network of health, so are you. All the other congregations, the religious professionals here, our network of the Unitarian Universalist Association, we are sharing in your journey, supporting you and helping you thrive. We are deeply interconnected, part of that interdependent web of life that our seventh principle so eloquently celebrates. As we begin to move out of this pandemic and deeper into this new ministry, may we live into health, may we live into thriving. May it be so, and amen.
see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world, wonderful world. I see skies of blue and clouds of white, the bright blessed day, the dark sacred night, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people going by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They really say, I love you. I hear babies cry, I watch them grow. They learn much more than I ever know. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world, wonderful world. Yes, I think to myself, what a wonderful world, wonderful, wonderful.
Reverend Joe, can I ask you to step to the front? I wanna, since I'm giving you the charge to the minister, I wanna be able to speak to you. I forgot this part, sorry. Dear Rev Joe, sacred is the call you have responded to, the call to journey with this congregation to tend to the holy, to the sacred. It is an honor to offer you this charge, and to do so, I'm drawing from the wisdom of other spiritual leaders. Parker Palmer, in his book, Let Your Life Speak, says, vocation does not come from willfulness, it comes from listening. So I charge you with listening to your life, and to allow the authenticity of your life to permeate your ministry. Let your actions be guided by tapping into your inner wisdom, by listening to the longings of your call, and also by listening to the wisdom that will come from others. He also states that our lives are experiments with truth. In an experiment, negative results are at least as important as successes. We live in a society that rewards excellence and perfectionism, yet we are all, most of the time, new at the experiences we are facing. As you experiment with truth, value both the successes and also the negative results. They are both messengers. Listen to what they have to say. Give yourself the grace of acknowledging you are fallible. Let the negative results guide you into a space of reflection and not of shame, of learning and not of shutting down. Ask yourself, what is this specific experiment with truth teaching me? Be a lifelong learner. Let curiosity drive you. Let your questions guide you. Remain open to the learnings life and ministry will continue to bring. Leave space for joy. As Mary Oliver stated, if you suddenly and unexpectedly feel joy, give in to it. Do not hesitate. Laugh often. Immerse yourself in the things that bring you joy. Share your joy with your congregation. Do not hesitate. I charge you with taking care of the only gift you have to give, yourself, in mind, body, and spirit. Take time to rest, to ground yourself. Make space for your spiritual practices, for practices that bring you comfort, that renew your spirit. Take time to care for the relationships that matter to you. Immerse yourself in silence, in prayer, in meditation. Eat food that will nourish your body. Sleep well. Go out for walks. Read books that feed your spirit and mind. Parker Palmer reminds us, self-care is never a selfish act. It is simply good stewardship of the only gift I have, the gift I was put on earth to offer others. Anytime we can listen to true self and give the care it requires, we do not only do it for ourselves, but for the many others whose lives we touch. So I charge you with taking care of the only gift you have to give for you and for the lives you touch. And I close with these words from Clarissa Pinkola Estes. The reasons that the soul is so often treated poorly in the larger culture, the reason that is so often dishonored and pointed to as pathetic, poor, strangled thing is because so many individuals do not say aloud and do not live out loud their absolute certain knowledge of the soul. So I charge you with living out loud your absolutely certain knowledge of the soul. The wisdom that your formation, your ministry, the relationship you have fostered, your life experiences have already left you and that you are ready to share. Joe, sacred is your call and sacred is the gift you have to give.
Well, hello, you good people of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of San Diego. It's good to be with you. Good to be with you, Reverend Joe, and with colleagues, religious professionals, all of one. I bring you greetings from your kin just up the road at Palomar Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in Vista, which is also on the stolen land of the Luiseño and the Kumeyaay nations. Our congregations were formed right at the same time. Did you know that? Answering an ad that was put in the newspaper by Monroe Husbands, calling people to get together to a meeting to seed fellowships in places that were considered too remote to have a minister. Now that was certainly Vista, y'all. And it was this area as well. So it is good to be with you today. An installation is a momentous thing for a congregation, beloveds. But you already know that, don't you? As you've prepared, as you've anticipated this day, wondering what it would be like, you've declared your intention to journey together in covenant, in kindness, as you live your shared ministry here in your congregation and in the wider world. I applaud the ministry that is developing here with your new partner in this ministry, the skilled and wise Reverend Joe, with whom you will co-create a ministry of justice and joy, compassion and kindness, transformation and hope. Now, as we've already heard, to say that you've begun this ministry in a challenging time is an understatement. Who would have thought that you would search in the midst of a pandemic? So much to attend to, grappling with uncertainty, forging a way forward without a map, figuring it out as you went along, as so many of us have. And you have chosen one another. You've chosen to live from covenant. UU theologian James Luther Adams has written extensively about covenant and our faith. He quotes theologian Martin Buber, "The human being is a promise-making, promise-keeping, promise-breaking, promise-renewing creature." The important piece here is the promise renewing. You have decided to put your hearts in a holy place to do this holy work, to covenant with one another and the wider community. I love the metaphor of wilderness and compost. I add another metaphor for you as you think about congregational ministry. And I step into this metaphor a little cautiously, knowing that I'm not a musician, so I beg forgiveness ahead of time. Now, I've come to think about congregational ministry, that it's like jazz. Theologian Jay McDaniel helped me to think about this years ago in thinking of justice as jazz. And this has shaped me in my own work. It has all the elements. Individual players working together with various instruments, with the goal to create with aesthetic intent, something that comes to being even as it is created. The need to pay close attention to what is happening. And although we had a quartet here, their music would not have worked had they not been paying close attention, blending their voices and still retaining the individual beauty of each voice. Jazz requires breathing spaces, rests, and it includes in congregational life the heritage of that music as music of justice. It's all there. In ministry, as with jazz, you know you have a beginning. You may have an idea of where you're going to go. You have handholds, a mission, a covenant, but you know you have to be nimble and ready to improvise, to work together, to respond to obstacles, internal and external. We are all called to feel our way into the work as we respond to changing, unexpected, some devastating situations and circumstances like a global pandemic, an insurrection, climate disaster, threats to our democracy, and every other unpredictable thing that happens. We are called to grasp and shape radical, just responses to white supremacy, to poverty, oppression, and their various manifestations as they are before us all as they ever have been. See who your partners are within this fellowship and beyond. In the wider community, see who your partners are and follow their lead, their tune. These times have given us, humanity, so much pain and evil and uncertainty and the opportunity for creative and improvisational responses. That opportunity is also unprecedented. This is a charge for this congregation's ministry. coming together, listening to one another from deep inside with a loving heart and a curious attitude, respecting and encouraging each other's talents, congregation, and minister, with the intention to create something beautiful and something transformational together while developing your unique and creative potentials. And I know who you are. I've seen you. I've seen the work that you've done. I've seen your improvisation. Ministry like jazz is about paying close attention, trusting the wisdom in each of you. It is about being accountable and forgiving, making the best of and even riffing off your own and others' mistakes, centering perspectives from the margins. It is about cultivating the ability to hold multiple perspectives and responding creatively to them as they arise, improvising when necessary, feeling the power of each other's faith, living in kindness and covenant as you play together. So, beloved friends, breathe. You could do that now. Breathe. Pick up your instruments. Trust in each other. Trust in the power of the Spirit. Trust in the availability of fresh possibilities in each and every note, in each and every moment. Much love to you. Many blessings to you. We're right on up the road over there at Palomar Fellowship. Blessings on your grand adventure. I can't wait to see what you do next.
Well, speaking of making some music, let's make some together. Let us rise in body and or in spirit as we sing Blue Boat Home. The words again are in our orders of service.
Let's give a hand again for our choir and Marshall. What a blessing. "24 years ago, when my husband and I and our little son, was little then, joined this fellowship, did I ever expect that I would have the blessing of being able to help with the installation of a settled minister. So I'll get to speak, and then in the order of service, you will see where we will all speak together. No right is more precious to a free congregation than that of choosing its own minister. By the same token, no right is more precious to a Unitarian Universalist minister than of choosing the congregation she or he will serve. It is with great joy that we formally recognize the relationship now existing between the people of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of San Diego and the Reverend Joanne Elizabeth Green, whom we have freely chosen and who have freely chosen us. Our choice is based not only on our heritage of liberal religion, but also upon the hopes and aspirations we hold for the future. This service symbolizes our dedication to new efforts. We affirm by this act the goals toward which we strive and the ideals by which we are sustained and strengthened. Will the members please rise in body or spirit and join me in the following? We cherish our congregation for its historic achievements and for its efforts to keep abreast of changing times and changing human needs. We celebrate its devotion to freedom, its belief in the intrinsic dignity and worth of human beings, its responsiveness to the needs and aspirations of its people. We cherish the memory of those who founded, nurtured, and progressively transformed our existence as a congregation. We cherish our congregation for all that it now has to give, the relationships it makes possible, the loyalties and common endeavors it encourages, the imagination and creativity it stimulates, the comfort and solace it brings, the quickened sense of conscience it engenders, the positive influence it exerts on children, youth, adults, and the wider community. We cherish our congregation for what it may yet become through our united efforts. Having thus expressed our love for our congregation, we now desire to install you as our minister. We recognize that this act symbolizes a covenant together. We would have you dwell among us, preaching the truth in freedom and love. We would have you minister to us in times of joy and sorrow. We would have you lead with us a mutual quest toward a greater and deeper religious life. Are you willing to take up these obligations?
I am.
We, on our part, pledge ourselves to remember that the work of this church belongs to all of us. As we would ask you to be charitable toward our shortcomings, we will also remember that you are human and can falter. We recognize that we bear a responsibility in your material welfare and spiritual development. We pledge ourselves to maintain the freedom of pulpit and of pew. We pledge to assist and work with you in our common growth of our religious lives. Members of UUFSD, are you willing to take up these obligations?
We are.
we the members of UUFSD, do install you as our minister of this congregation and offer you our encouragement and help in carrying out our shared ministry together.
With a deep sense of responsibility and with gratitude for your confidence, I take up my duties. May our shared ministry together promote justice, righteousness, and love among ourselves and with all the world. Amen.
Let's sing together one more time.
We extinguish these flames, but take their light into our lives, to be the presence of love in the midst of fear, the voice of hope in the face of despair, and the hands of justice, restoring a world worthy of our children.
I'm going to cry. Beloved congregation, in this sanctuary, the bond we have formed this morning was symbolized by the covenant we created together in this installation service. On this chancel, we heard wise words and thoughts of leaders and are reminded of why we gather together as a spiritual covenantal congregation. May these bonds give us strength of commitment, passion for service, and love for each other that will create an even stronger community of Unitarian Universalist faith. May we never forget what we have created this morning. May we take the guidance we have been given today to be that congregation we see in our vision. May we know deep inside what our mission is and can be. Know the true covenantal nature of how to treat each other, and that together we can create to go out and bless the world. This is our shared responsibility, to bring that hope and change into the world, to walk our talk, to create that beloved community we hold so dear. May it be so. Blessed be.
Thank you, Katie, for blessing us with your talents. Everyone, let's continue our celebration. Please join us in the core area for a celebration lunch. Thank you all for being here. Bye, everybody on Zoom.